This is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast revisiting television sci-fi, fantasy, and everything in between. This week, Trapped in Space.
All right, let's just cut the crap, okay? Don't you have any suggestions, any real ideas?
Oh, I've had ideas. The only problem is, none of them come to a very pretty conclusion. A couple of somebodies going out the airlock. That is, of course, if we can decide on who that's going to be.
What do you mean, if we can decide?
I mean, if we all decide to act civilized at our little poison tea party we have scheduled tomorrow morning. That's what I mean.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast that feels a kinship with the character of Howard the Coward. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
Incredible.
I think I had something that's real, but I like that Karen's already hysterically laughing and we haven't even started talking about anything.
It's just the name Howard the Coward.
Oh,
You can't not enjoy it.
Exactly. It was a wonderful joke. What a great way to kick this off.
Here was the line I like, though, that I was going to use for What's Real. This ain't no breezy shirt-sleeve picnic out there. I thought that was a good line.
No, guys, the best line in the movie was obviously, God, I'm good.
Well, listener, we are clearly joined by a guest this week. Karen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I think it's pretty safe to assume that no one here had heard of a movie called Trapped in Space before.
True.
No. And apparently it's based on a short story. Anyone read that short story?
I did.
You did?
Oh.
How short was it?
I can send you the PDF. Pretty short.
Well, this is good. I'm glad someone read the short story because you can tell us how close this movie is to the short story.
Not close.
Great.
All I read was that in the short story, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, it's only two people on the ship,
That's right.
correct?
Yeah, it's McNeil and Grant.
And when I was watching this, it was before I looked into it, I thought, man, this would have been better if it was just the two guys. And then I was like, oh, that's what the short story is.
Yeah, well, that's the difference between Arthur C. Clarke and whoever made
You're not saying not the same caliber.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. It had its virtues, though. Let's get into it.
All right. Before we do, though, we like to ask people who come on this podcast, Karen, do you have a interest, an inclination toward television science fiction, or have we forced you into a terrible place with this? I mean, we have. I know we have, but...
Well, yes, I love sci-fi, and I grew up watching the kind of, like, big classics on TV, like Star Trek, and I loved also Star Wars, and I loved the X-Files. I was a child of the 80s, so it was really exciting to me that I would come and watch terrible sci-fi movies and chat with one of my favorite people, Jordan.
Very sweet. Karen, can I embarrass you? Can you tell Luke what you dressed up as in school when you were a kid?
That was so mean. Okay, so as I was eagerly awaiting the premiere of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, in 1999, our school organized a class trip to go see the movie. Not on Halloween. I decided that I would attend the screening dressed as Queen Amidala, including, like, the big head thing and the, like, lip paint and, like, the big dress. My mom helped me make the dress. So I went to the movie theater with my entire class dressed as Queen Amidala, but the only person dressed up. And I was a social pariah for the rest of middle school. It was terrible.
So your credentials are legit.
Yes.
This is truly legitimate credentials. I like this a lot.
Okay, good.
I love it. There's something so sad and sweet about that, though, of just a kid, like, you're so gung-ho about this thing, and socially it's the exact wrong thing to do. Maybe not nowadays. Maybe it's, like, cool, but, man, if I had dressed up as that, I'd still be hanging by my wedgie by some hook in the bathroom.
Yeah, and I wasn't like a cute Natalie Portman Queen Amidala. I was like a slightly overweight, like going through a growth spurt awkwardly Queen Amidala, middle school Amidala. It was not a good look. Not at all.
I'm impressed because that's the first one of that second trilogy, right? So you already were you were preemptively saying, I really like this character I haven't seen
Before
before.
I had even seen it. And boy, was I mistaken that it would be a good film.
Very impressed. I'm very impressed right now. Well, I couldn't find out much about the creation of this film. There's little to no writing about it. Granted, it was a very half-hearted search on Google, but there's very little going on.
Totally.
Well, you know what? It's indicative of a lot of stuff in this time period. It's that weird TV movie. I don't know if this was intended ever to be a series as like a backdoor pilot, but it just feels like it has that budget and that look, that production style of movies that were just on TV at that time. Like there just seemed to be a lot of these kind of like, what is this thing? And like, who is this for? Maybe it's just because it's like, because you don't know where your remote is. That's who it's for.
It does have that kind of budget 90s vibe, but at the same time, the design of the ship is so like luxurious, like for a freighter ship, like the beds that they have, like these cool kind of like curved sort of mod looking sex beds. Like it's
Well, that's what I was going to say. We should talk about how this, before we get into it, how this movie starts with sex scenes. So, I mean, that's why you need those beds.
It comes off strong that way, doesn't it?
totally immediate hook.
Well, here's what I know. It was released January 21st, 1995, Jordan, which means it was on the air at the same time of two series we've watched before. Can you guess what those two series were?
Tech War?
Yep.
And 1995, we also watched... Give me a hint.
It was on in 1995.
I don't know. I can't think of what the second one
Earth
was.
2, Jordan. Earth 2.
Oh, Earth 2. Earth 2.
Two of your favorites.
What a difference in quality of shows, huh?
I don't know. Let's get into it. Let's get into the show. Here's the IMDb summary for Trapped in Space. After an accident during a routine trip to Venus, a spaceship has only enough oxygen left for 3 people. ... out of 5 on board.
The tension. I like, by the way, it's a routine trip to Venus, but they don't seem to have any backups. Like, how does this ship work in terms of the oxygen? I had a lot of questions.
Just pump it into that one room and hope for the best.
But that can't possibly be how they run the this ship in space. It can't be a supply of oxygen. It must have a self-generating oxygen, or there's no way they'd be able to make that trip. Am I wrong?
No, there's exposition about this specific thing near the beginning of the movie. It's that they have oxygen reserves, and it's the oxygen reserves that get knocked out by the asteroid, right?
Right. I was distracted by the sex scene.
I was distracted by the start of the movie when it gave me the saddest title treatment of all time. It was like an iMovie, whatever the basic font was. In the first 5 seconds, just like, trapped in space, I guess. Here we go.
The editor, they realized he had only like a couple minutes left. He's like, oh, yeah, sure, I could throw a title on.
It's just like a ship on a Windows 98 Starscape, like, screensaver. I'm like, oh, good, here we go.
Yeah, but to start, we get a shot of, as Karen mentioned, there's sort of this blocky freighter ship. It's sort of more in tune with, I'd say, Star Wars than Star Trek.
Very much so. Very, very utilitarian. It's transporting some cargo on a 6-month journey from Venus to, or going to Venus, I assume from Earth. Did you guys catch what its cargo was?
Oh,
Only once the accident had happened, they go into the cargo hold looking for some material to help them.
Something
basically.
to help it. Yeah.
Yeah, and they reveal that it's storing a bunch of random things, including a dead body in a chamber, right?
Dead body in a cryo chamber.
Yeah.
The other like, there's very little in this cargo hold. The other boxes were wine, cigars, and porno.
That's if they're desperate on Venus.
I was absolutely amazed by how empty the cargo hold was. Like, there was nothing in there.
Is this economically viable, this shipment? I couldn't tell. The captain of this ship in particular is a Captain Howard the Coward. He has apparently been bumped down recently from a liner captain to a freighter captain. And when we meet him, he's just sending voicemails to his lawyer on trying to how to obstruct justice in a criminal case against him.
I like it. They let you know right away you shouldn't be on this guy's side. He's a bad guy. There's no ambivalence about it at all. He's bad.
It was amazingly artful exposition. It was so great. Just get us right there.
And then we meet the rest of the difficult to do, like, it, at the start I could not tell these people apart, but there's McNeil, who's apparently the ship's chief engineer, I believe. There is his trainee, Isaacs, who he's sleeping with, which, bad.
Here's a question for you guys. Obviously, there's some power dynamics at play, and that's probably inappropriate for the small crew that they have. That aside, are we supposed to know? We're supposed to think he's a bad person, right? Because he's not nice to her. He's not really nice to anybody. But I wasn't sure because all these characters are so two-dimensional. It was hard to even grasp what the audience is supposed to feel. Are we supposed to just think he's cool, or are we supposed to think he's kind of a
Both.
dirtbag?
Both,
Definitely
yeah, I
both.
agree.
He's a cool
Totally.
dirtbag.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because he's a bit of a floozy, wouldn't you say?
Yes, he's an oddball. I think you're supposed to like think he's okay at the start, and then once the accident happens, thinks he's a jerk, and then you're supposed to win your way back toward liking him later.
Right, and he's played by Jack Wagner of Melrose Place.
Yeah,
fame.
these are soap stars.
That's who these people are. Okay, I was just like, I don't know any of these actors.
Except you're going to introduce a character, a Grant, and did you recognize who Grant was?
Nope.
Jack Coleman, who played Frank Nolan in Nightmare Cafe, but he's now balding with a goatee.
Wait, this is the star of Nightmare Cafe?
That's correct.
Did not recognize him in any way, shape, or form. What does Grant do on this ship? I don't understand. Like, I know he's a family man who doesn't talk much. That's all I know about his character.
I think that's it. I think that's what it said in the Bible.
He's sort of framed as like the only decent man on board, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Because Isaac's this sort of trainee who's there. There's two women on the ship, but she's the one who just has to absorb all the sexual commentary from every single crew member. Very much felt very 90s and like a very unsafe work environment.
Oh, extraordinarily misogynistic. And then the other woman, who's more senior, is framed as like essentially like an eccentric, crazy dog lady.
Yes, Jillings is her name. I guess she is second in command. And yeah, all you know is she brought her dog Cowboy along.
And I looked it up, by the way. The dog's real name in real life is Cowboy. I think it probably, like, all it would respond to, they're like, might as well just call the character Cowboy, because that's what he responds to.
I guess that's not true. We do find about Jillings that at some point, I guess she was in a similarly difficult position and she didn't care for it, so that's why she never wanted to be captain. So that's why she's having such a hard time.
Yeah.
I don't think her character's given much, by the writer, she's not really given much to work with. Like, she's sort of just like written as kind of like a hysterical person, which I think is sort of unfair, because that's sort of how she was before things get bad, and then things get bad and she's sort of like just continues kind of freaking out.
Did you find her hysterical?
Well, and maybe it's not the right word. She was just like she's on edge before, you know, she needs to be on edge, and I'm not saying it's not her fault. I'm curious as to why the character's even portrayed
I
that
think
way.
they're all pretty two-dimensional. They're all just immediately on edge at all times. Like, the only other character left, before we get into all of this stuff, is Palmer, who his only role is Big Jerk. He's Big Jerk on ship.
Yeah, and he likes knives.
Yeah, that's right. He's not just a big jerk. He's like the loose cannon. He's like
He's the wild
the guy
card.
who's like gonna fuck shit up. Yeah.
We're supposed to know he's like this because he had previously survived another catastrophic disaster on the Titan.
Yeah, so he mansplains about what the rookie has to learn constantly.
He really does.
I mean, I'll give it the one piece of credit to the show. They spend no time before the inciting incident happens. Is that, like, in the first, I feel like 5 minutes, the Captain Howard is in his quarters. He gets a notification from the ship that an asteroid is about to collide. And I will respect the Captain Howard for this one thing. He does not hesitate. He gets this notification. He stands up, walks to the escape pod, and fucks right off, leaving the crew behind. Like, no hesitation. He just gets up and leaves.
He's thought about it before in his darkest moments. He's like, if this ever happened, what would I do? He's like, yeah, I just leave.
And it's also worth noting that in the Arthur C. Clarke short story, it also begins with the inciting incident. Like, there is no pretext. It just goes, bam, we're running out of oxygen and they got to figure it out. So,
which is one somewhat connected thing that's I thought was interesting, is that because they have so many, there's not even that many characters, but because there is whatever 4 or 5 characters, I don't think anyone decided what each of these people actually do on the ship, because when we start the thing, no, who's flying this ship? Is it just an automated ship? They're like having dinner, playing cards, and the captain's talked to his lawyer, but I'm like, no one's flying this ship?
It's just automated, my friend. You're just out there in 6 months. It just goes straight.
yeah, you just point it in one direction and put it on autopilot.
So that's why there's lots of time to test out those fancy beds.
Totally.
It is funny because that the alert that you're about to get hit by an asteroid is only in the captain's quarters. Nobody else gets that notification.
Well, it may be on the bridge, but they're all too busy eating.
Essentially, as you may have guessed, asteroid hits the ship, goes to their oxygen reserves, and now they're kind of stuck in this position where they're like, uh-oh, there's only enough oxygen left for 3 of us to make the journey, but we do have enough oxygen left for a 22-hour decision period.
Oh, might as well use the time you have.
And I guess there's also they can't send a distress signal. That's the other part. They can't send out a message. They can only receive newscasts from somewhere else. So they're constantly getting newscasts about how like everybody thinks they're dead.
Yeah, it is the one thing you have to sort of hold your disbelief a little bit that they wouldn't immediately send help for them. I mean, I like, not a spoiler, this thing's been out for 20 years, but they do eventually send help, but it seems to take so long after they decide it's okay to do that, where you would assume they would just immediately send someone.
The thing is that they show a clip of Captain Howard saying it's like everybody's dead, no reason to check it out, and they're like, okay, checks out.
Yeah,
despite his like a previous criminal case where he killed everyone on the space liner, I guess.
Yeah, fool me once.
Anyway, there is sort of there's this sort of a bit of time where they're like trying to figure out who's gonna, like, should they draw lots? How should we live? Everyone kind of is just like immediately incomplete. Everyone gives up on their lives so quickly. Like Captain McNeil immediately grabs, or not Captain McNeil, the chief engineer, immediately grabs wine, gets drunk, and just orders a bunch of holographic hula girls to dance around him.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be sort of a little bit more salacious. I think because the other character reacts as if he's like, they're digital prostitutes, I suppose, but really they're just dancing, which seems pretty harmless.
They were caressing him.
They were
with their hands.
They were caressing. That's true.
I think she's not so much upset about the hula girls as his complete lack of spine. I think is what she realizes. Isaac, his trainee, they've had a relationship, they've been sleeping together, and she's like, oh, you're an awful human being, it turns out.
Yeah.
Isaac's, however, is far more capable. She's just like, listen, maybe one of us should go check out the damage outside, see if there's like any oxygen pockets left that might like extend our, like, she's at least trying to do something. And her I guess boyfriend / chief engineer is getting drunk with hula girls, so she's pretty annoyed, which I thought was very reasonable.
Totally. She's essentially the only proactive one. I mean, she's just trying to fix the problem.
Everyone does seem to give up, don't they? Very quickly.
It is interesting, and I think they probably didn't do enough with this because it's not very well written, but there is an interesting idea that the person who has the least experience, who is to this point being treated the worst, is clearly the person who has the most focus and is the only person who's being proactive at all. But they sort of, as we're going to learn, she sort of seems to get punished for that, which is not how I thought it was going to go.
Yeah, it's wild. She does this spacewalk because she's like, I'm going to go out there, I'll check it out. Jillings and kind of Grant are on her side. So she does this spacewalk, checks out the damage. She's in this like big spacesuit with like rockets on it and stuff. And of course we have to have there's some tension there. Once McNeil finds out she's gone out, he freaks out because he's drunk, but he's just like, if she uses her little rocket boosters, if there's any leaking oxygen, she could die. And of course we immediately cut back and she fires her rocket boosters on leaking oxygen. There's an explosion. She's thrown up into, I guess it's an antenna that's damaged. It's like full of wires or something. She's trapped up in this thing, and McNeil has to like man up and go out and save her, I guess.
While drunk.
Well, very drunk, yes. And that goes very well. That may be the most insane scene of the movie. He is like pulling wire. I didn't understand. She's like wrapped in little tiny wires somehow, attached to this thing, and then he like her suit gets clipped very slightly, right?
What it is I think it's just because they don't have a big budget and they don't really block it very well, but I think the tension was supposed to be that she's really caught in, but it's a very gentle situation because even the slightest move might tear her costume. That's really what they're trying to do, but it just kind of looks like she barely moves and gets the tiniest little tear. And then Karen, what happens if you get a tiny little tear in your costume?
Like a full decompression of her suit? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Is that a trick question? The way you asked it? So funny. Yeah, and then it was like the most gruesome head explosion.
I think my favorite part of her head explosion in her suit is like, it's great. It's just like a huge balloon of blood explodes inside her suit, and they cut back to McNeil, and somehow he's got blood on the front of his helmet too. I'm like, but it was all inside of, I don't understand where this blood came from.
Yeah, she was fully enclosed with an helmet.
It was like For a movie that was just like the most like talky, boring PG thing, to suddenly like have someone's head explode graphically was a very surprising move in this movie.
I assume the little bit of blood was streaming out of that hole all over him. A little hole in her suit.
It's
That's
like
where it was
squeezing
coming
a
out of.
ketchup packet and it just like squirts out.
That's right.
I mean, I will say the moment right before the giant blood explosion, when her face starts to get all like, that was amazing. It was terrifying.
It was good. There was like this hot second where you get a clip of a great special effect happening and then her head explodes. So good.
It was so good.
Well, and we're what, about 10, 15 minutes into the movie?
No, it's
That's
about
the
30,
highlight.
45 minutes of the movie. Weirdly, so little happens that you can really jump to like all the important. And there's like when she's doing this and she accidentally causes a like another explosion by like lighting up this oxygen. They come back in. She's dead. They're like, well, that's unfortunate. Like, also, we've lost so much oxygen now. Only one of us can live. Like, there's just they've went from 3 to 1 in like 2 seconds. It's like, well, now only one of us gets to live.
The reason she went out there is they said they think maybe the scanner, whatever they have in the computer, can't tell the exact amount of oxygen that might be stuck in these sort of oxygen tubes, I guess. And when she went out there, what she unintentionally did was there was extra oxygen in there, but the accident somehow blew that out. So there's less oxygen than they think now. I think that was what they were implying. I think.
I don't know, because even this McNeil character, he comes back in and he's just like, she might have been right. There might be some more air pockets. But they never look into it any further. Like, well, it's all like one of us gets to live. Everyone else has to die, I guess.
It is interesting, though, because even to this point, like, you would think there'd be some sort of sense of tension, and maybe both of you felt differently, but, like, I didn't feel any. Even though we've had a character die and we have this clock on how long they have to live, I was just like, I don't know. I guess they'll be
It
fine.
doesn't feel like there's any tension on the ship. Like, even once they announce only one of them can now live, like, all that really happens is this Palmer character, this wild card, he just goes insane. He's like, all right, that's it. I'm going to be the one who lives, I guess. And he, like, wanders off, starts gathering materials. Like, he gets a switchblade from somewhere and stabs the dog to death.
And he booby traps the ship.
He Home Alones the fuck out of this ship. It's just Home Alone traps all over this ship now.
Well, you're saying that the captain didn't have any hesitation. He didn't either.
No.
It's because he survived the Titan. He knows if you're going to live, you have to, like, build a tripwire that opens a door into space, or put a bunch of forks under the floor and, like, have them thrown gently at a human being.
I do have to say, with regard to that moment where McNeil trips on the wire that then opens the hatch into space, that was, like, perplexing to me. Like, after we've just witnessed this woman die from her suit decompressing because of, like, a tiny puncture wound in her suit, to then have an entire hatch door open to space, and he's just kind of, like, holding on like it's a windy day, like he's on a sailboat and just needs to get below deck or something. Very strange.
There was no consistent logic there. And then I was also like, so Palmer's worried about the oxygen left in the ship, so he set up a booby trap to blow more oxygen into space. I was like, how is that helping you?
And they have several scenes later on where they're getting rid of, no spoiler that people are going to die. They get rid of people's bodies by sending them off into space, but they just open the door and they're just like standing there. And I like that gravity apparently works where they are, but not 1 foot away where the body floats away. And I was like, and also they're just opening the door. It's so funny how little thought is put into this. Like, I'm not saying it has to be hard sci-fi, but like, there had to be someone who was like, guys, does this make any sense? But no one did that.
Oh, but those moments of the bodies floating, they were just the best part of the whole movie.
That was a wild sequence, because what we're getting to is a bunch of people are going to die in short order, but they all die, like, this is like an hour into the movie now. Suddenly 3 people die in like the next 5 minutes. And every time someone dies, we get a funeral scene for each individual person, with them wrapped in white linens and getting pushed out of an airlock. I'm like, how many times am I going to watch this same sequence?
With no score is the other. I don't know if you picked up on that, but every time they cut from inside the ship to the moment where the body is floating, it goes scoreless. So it's just like a silent floating body.
Just to bring that impact of the silence of space, they really want to sell you on it.
Totally.
But yes, Palmer sets up these booby traps. None of them worked the way he wants them to. And then we cut to a scene to really ratchet up the tension of this like movie for some reason, in which a mysterious crew member slits his throat and we don't know who's murdered him.
We all just assumed it was McNeil,
Oh yeah,
right?
McNeil seemed the most likely.
Definitely.
And it's at this moment you're like, okay, well, there's 3 of them left. One of them's a murderer. Where's this gonna go? And they immediately are just like, hey, what happened to Jillings? It's just like cut to her. Oh, she committed suicide in her bedroom because her dog is dead. I'm like, oh, so there's now 30 minutes left of this movie with just these 2 men.
Yeah, it's funny because as we said before, the short story being 2 people, this movie has all these characters but just wants to kill them right away to get down to the tension of 2 people, where it could have started with them. But I think the issue is they didn't want to have that slow, somber sort of 2 people having a long discussion around a table as to what they're supposed to do. They wanted more action, but they kind of jammed it into
They
5
wanted
minutes.
the whole conceit of opening with a sex scene and having this sexual tension between this like young cadet and like multiple other men on the ship. Like that is like they needed to insert that. So they needed to create this whole apparatus of characters around Grant and McNeil in order to achieve it.
We need 20 minutes of sexual
Yeah.
tension, 20 minutes of who's going to die, and then another 45 minutes of 2 men just sitting around.
Yeah. And the 2 men that are left in the film are the same 2 men from the short story.
So is this the part where the short story kind of starts? We basically, it's as if they're like, all right, now we finally got to the part where we have a short story.
It's a little different in the short story. The character McNeil in the short story, in the film, ends up being the de facto captain. Like once everybody else is gone or been off,
Right.
by the time that it's down to the 2 of them, he's like the senior one. In the short story, it's actually the reverse. So Grant starts as the ship's captain from the beginning. In the short story, McNeil is also kind of an a-hole, like he's kind of a d-bag.
So that's authentic.
100%. And Grant basically has this holier-than-thou position that, like, he should be the one to survive because he's the better person, obviously. But then it ends up being the reverse, that it's McNeil that survives.
Well, that is sort of like what happens here, because once it's the 2 of them, Grant just starts thinking about his family, and he really suspects that McNeil has killed this Palmer character, but also he's really suspicious he's killed every other character, even though we as the audience know that's not accurate. But it is what happens is Grant just like kind of gets to the point where he's like, well, you know what? One of us can live. I'm the better person. So I'm going to invite McNeil for a coffee this morning, and I'm going to we've got like suicide powder sitting in a cupboard. I'm going to pour it in his coffee. I'll kill McNeil, and I'll be the one who survives. Like, that's kind of what we get to here.
The internal dialogue we're supposed to get is that he's like, I have something to live for. I have a family, and I'm a better person. Has nobody, and he's a murderer, so I should be the one to survive.
And there's a little bit of tension about maybe McNeil has switched the cup, but they push it aside quickly. We're supposed to think like, oh, McNeil did drink the right cup. Grant's pulled it off. And then we get like a hard cut to, I guess, like 4 months later. Like, it was just a very abrupt, sudden cut. A rescue party has come to check out the ship because in the interim, I guess they figured out the way the ship was damaged, someone must have survived, and it's like even slowed down as it's approached Venus. So like this rescue party has arrived to see what's going on the ship, and they've brought the captain Howard with them. And I was just like, why have you come, Howard? Like, you know it's going to be awkward. No matter what happens on that ship, you know it's going to be an awkward little conversation you're going to have.
I like the idea in a rescue mission. Just think about it like here today. There's some horrible tragedies happen and someone has miraculously made it out and they're like, well, we need to go rescue everyone else. You know who we're going to bring? The person who was traumatized in the accident. Let's bring them to go see what's left. It's such a... And the reason they're doing it is because obviously you want to have this reveal of these 2 characters see each other again. But yes, in world logic, it makes no sense.
Guys, this is what happens in Titanic. In Titanic, Rose goes back for the rescue mission on the ship as an old lady. It's totally a convention of the rescue mission to bring back the person who was in the original accident.
That's true. You're right.
Howard needs to go back and find the heart of the ocean.
Exactly.
That's what it's called, right? I think, anyway.
That's right. But, important note, in the short story, this moment between the 2 of them with the cups and the, like, attempted poisoning, you understand as the reader that McNeil is like hip to this plan and essentially changes the powder in the cyanide pill or whatever it is for of bitter salt so that he will be able to taste and know that his counterpart has attempted to off him. And so there's a line in the movie where he goes, bitter coffee or something like that. And that is a nod to the short story because that's what happens in the short story.
Well, I guess that's sort of what happens because what we see this rescue crew land, and the big reveal is that McNeil's the one who's somehow still alive on the ship. And when they reveal that, we just cut to a flashback. We just like go back to where we left off in the kitchen.
Wasn't that an odd narrative technique too? Because it's supposed to be like this, like it's almost like a commercial break sort of thing. Like you wouldn't believe it's not what you thought happened, but then 30 seconds later we just see it. I'm like, why not just continue that scene then instead of having this weird break for 10 seconds?
It's exactly what you just described, Karen. Is McNeil's like, oh, FYI, I changed all the poison out for salt so I'd know if you're going to murder me. And then Grant comes clean. He's like, I'm sorry, I think you're a murderer. That's why I tried to kill you. And McNeil's like, oh, yeah, by the way, I've had evidence this whole time that I didn't kill anyone. I haven't bothered to tell you up till now, but here's the suicide note from Gillings that explains that she murdered Palmer because he killed her dog, and so I'm innocent of all charges. It felt like information he could have provided a little earlier, but I like that he sat on that suicide note until an attempted murder on him. So Grant's just like, oh, I guess you're not a bad man, so maybe we should just draw cards and see who has to die. Also, I love that they're like, let's draw cards to see who lives. I'm like, high card or low card, guys? You got to say it before you draw. Nobody says anything. I'm just like, well, who is it, high card or low card? This draw's not going to work.
What are the conditions of this draw? What does this even mean?
Yeah, what happens? Because if I was doing that game, we didn't say anything. Then I put it. I'd be like, "What is this worth? I don't know anything about cards. Is this good?" And then the person would just like, he would just say, "Yeah, you die." I'm like, "All right, I guess it checks out."
This is you and me, Jordan. You pull the king, I pull the 5, and I'm like, "Oh, I was low card. Low card lives."
And like, give me that salt packet, whatever he died from.
But essentially, McNeil draws the king, Grant draws the 5, and Grant's the one who's got to die. Cut back to the rescue mission. Let's just jump back to the rescue mission now. And it's just like, McNeil's like, that's how I lived. And then he punches the Captain Howard in the face because you knew that was coming.
Mm-hmm.
I also like that he punches him in the face and he's just like, and now you're going to jail, not for killing us, but because you left this like computer disk behind that has all of the records of you trying to botch the trial for your other criminal conviction. Like, that's why you're going to prison now. I'm just like, not because he murdered you all. Like, there was like this, they really wanted to close out that story about him in that court case for some reason.
Yeah, you had to track that from the beginning. You know what I like though is the one little bit of technology we see in this show, because everything's kind of like pretty normal looking, like it doesn't look that sci-fi, but everything is done on like really mini CDs that are like colored. And they're like the size of like a cookie.
Pogs. They just use Pog.
They do
all
look
data
like Pogs.
is on Pogs in this future. He's like, I've got this Pog that proves you tried to corrupt justice.
Yeah.
And just when I think it's all over, I've forgotten about the weird piece of technology in the cargo hold they mentioned 1 hour and 15 minutes ago. Hey, wasn't there a dead body and some rich guy in a cryo tube sometime that was revealed earlier? And McNeil's like, hey, come with me. And he reveals that Grant is in a cryo tube this whole time. And I was like, oh, right, you guys have had this solution this whole time. And the rescue crew like, all right, well, let's try to wake him up and make sure he's still alive. And Grant wakes up and he's just like, how am I not dead? And it's at this moment you realize that McNeil never told him this plan. He's like, okay, kill yourself. And he's like, just kidding. I gave you a sedative and put you in a cryo tube. I was like, wouldn't it have been easier to be like, let's give you a sedative and put you in a cryo tube and see? Like, it's so crazy to think that McNeil's like, die. Why don't you die? And then later he's like, just kidding. I put you in a cryo tube. You're not dead. Like, it's just the most insane. Like, why would you do that to someone?
I can't hear Karen's audio, but I like that she's falling out of a chair laughing. I like that it's a gag. It's just funny when you wake the person up. You're like, hey, remember you went through that trauma?
You wrote that letter to your family saying goodbye? Prank!
Yeah. But they shake hands. They're friends.
A wild ending. And then from that like end to the movie, they cut to, I did the math, a straight 23 seconds of a static shot of the ship just floating in space before the credits roll. Just like I don't even know if there's music. It's just like a static shot of a ship in space for 23 seconds, and I'm like, oh my god! And then credits roll.
23 seconds is a ludicrous amount of time by today's entertainment logic.
I was like,
It's
were you
incredible.
running 23 seconds short? Is what's happening here? I don't understand.
100%. That's what it was.
This was wild. Jordan, why would you pick this?
I don't know. I picked it for Karen too.
Of course you did. Okay, so I want to get into. So, what about the theme? What are the themes of this? Like, what are you guys taking home? Like, what is leaving an impression on your soul from having watched this?
What's leaving an impression on my soul? Oh man, I mean, I think the themes of the movie are about, I guess, trust. It's mostly a movie about who can you trust. But you get so little insight into anyone's character, and they're all so willing to turn on each other at the drop of a hat. It's crazy.
Well, I would argue that there is this sort of like overarching theme of essentially like human malevolence, right? Like we had the option of having 3 survive. If we had just been able to agree on how that was going to work, then 3 would have survived, and that would have been, the best possible outcome given the cards they were dealt. But because they just essentially can't keep their shit in their pants, or whatever the analogy is, they end up having more death and destruction and terror inflicted on all of them, and fewer of them come out alive. So,
I mean, it is a grim take on humans for sure. Although at the end, you see, McNeil turns out to be such a sweetheart. He saves another life. Like, I don't know. I don't know what the lesson is.
Of course he was going to be the hero. His first line was, what was it?
Was it good for you?
No, it was not. It was, damn, I'm good. Damn, I'm good, he says.
That
was the beginning of the movie. As soon as he said that, you're like, of course this guy's going to come out on top.
Oh, I just thought that meant he was good at sex. I didn't realize it was an overarching theme.
No, it's like a foreshadowing of what's to come.
But it is a shame because you think there would be more for his sort of like a redemptive arc for him, Like, I'm fine with him starting off as kind of a dirtbag, and then when push comes to shove and he's put in this terrible situation, he finds that there's more in him than he originally thought, and maybe the people around him thought, and there is some genuine qualities to him. But that's not really what we get with him. It's sort of, he starts at a baseline of being this, as we said, kind of this arrogant, kind of gross guy, and he sort of just smarms his way through the movie, and at the end he's like, gotcha, you're not dead. And it's like, but his arc is just flat, and all the characters' arcs are flat, really.
I think we can all agree the movie we hoped to watch was about a man who sleeps with interns who turns out to be the hero.
Exactly.
That's the hero we're all craving these days.
Yeah.
Always great to see that, like, skanky intern explode first, right? Like, fuck her.
How dare she take the initiative?
That's what I was going to say. Again, there's another more interesting story that the person, I mean, maybe it's being done to death, but the person who has the least experience, but she has the greatest head on her shoulders, and she's the most proactive, and she actually saves everybody after they've kind of been pushing her down. There's something interesting there, but they're like, what we should do this woman? We should punish her because she's already been abused. Like, it's just such an odd choice to make. And maybe it really is a bit of a timestamp as to what we are supposed to appreciate as a viewer, of what we're supposed to expect of our heroes in our entertainment.
I will say that I think the actor that played Isaacs, the intern, was the winning actor of the film. I think she was the best one.
I agree.
Yeah. And
I like Cowboy.
Cowboy's pretty good too. And so I went down a Sigrid Thornton wormhole online after watching this movie to be like, who is this woman? What has she done? And there are some amazing stills of her on horseback. I don't know. Very interesting woman.
Well, she won a gold medal at the Olympics for horse riding.
No,
I made that up.
Oh my goodness.
Jordan hit the off button on his TV as soon as this was over and never thought about it again.
Well, you know what? But that's the thing, Karen, you're talking about what are the themes of this thing. Really, I think the impression you get is that of very little. I think this will fade off. It's not so offensive that you remember it. It's not so silly that you kind of laugh about it. It sort of hits that weird middle of just a unevocative, boring kind of TV movie, unfortunately, where there's not much to pull from. You know, it's like, could you get that angry or happy or upset? There's not that much to grab on.
I'm just grabbing onto those amazing mod beds that they have. Honestly, that whole spaceship is deluxo. Like, I can't even believe it.
I like the Pog technology, personally.
Totally.
All right. Well, I think we've seems like we've covered it all at this point. Do you guys want to rate Trapped in Space? Mm-hmm. Karen, we do this basically on the IMDb scale of 10 stars, though feel free to shake it up any way you like. You don't have to treat it as high art for sure. It's more about how much you enjoyed yourself, but feel free to do as the best or worst you can.
Honestly, it was a solid 7 for me.
Wow,
like,
7.
Really? Yeah.
That's amazing.
100%.
Well, Jordan did a good job then. He picked something for you, and it worked.
It sure did.
Just so I have perspective, Karen, what now would you rate the Phantom Menace as someone who dressed up and went to the premiere? Is that also a 7 out of 10?
I actually rewatched all of the Star Wars movies recently with my 7-year-old son, and I would say the Phantom Menace is like a 3.5. It is a brutal movie.
Yeah.
It is terrible.
And which of the characters from Trapped in Space did you dress up as to watch it?
Okay, well, Sigrid Thornton as Isaacs, obviously most relatable,
Great.
being also a woman and also not wanting to be the like crazy eccentric mother of Cowboy. And she had like alien vibes, like with the like Sigourney Weaver in that like one-piece suit situation. Like, it's a good look.
That's
it
a
looks
great.
great.
This movie feels like it's kind of wants to be Alien for the first 30 minutes, like who's gonna live, and then at some point it's like, and now the short story starts.
That's right. They really needed to improve and refine Arthur C. Clarke.
I mean, it is almost. I mean, it's not that it's inoffensive. It occasionally is offensive, but this movie is like something you could have behind you, and it would just play, and like you could just look at it every like 10 minutes and like go along for the ride. I was bored, but I was also. This isn't the worst thing I've ever watched for this podcast. I don't know. I don't know what to do with it. I'm like, I love when a head explodes. That's one of my favorite things on earth. So it's got that. It's got that going for it. I find something disturbingly funny about pranking someone into dying and then like being like, I just put you in a cryo tube. I'm gonna go 2.5.
2.5. I think I'm gonna come somewhere in between you two. I think it's not good, but again, like you're both saying, there's sort of just like you're like, it's fine. I've spent my time doing worse things. So I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10.
4 out of 10.
4 out of 10, I think. So that's pretty good. 7,
A real
4, and 2.5.
wide spectrum of possibilities for this movie.
Yeah.
Honestly, on IMDb, 35 people have rated it 10 out of 10. Just saying. So there you go.
It's just all the people that worked on the movie. They're like, please just give it a 10.
I truly was like, I bet you if you asked anyone who worked in this movie, you said this title to them, they would look at you blankly with no recollection of it ever of happening.
Yeah, probably.
There was one good lighting scene I liked where Frank was that his name? Whoever the dude who with the goatee was
Palmer.
in the cryo chamber. Palmer. When he woke up and was in bed and they had this sort of like old film noir kind of like lighting on him from like Venetian blinds that apparently exist in his room, and I was like, ooh, I like that. I remember that.
These bedrooms, they really are the star of the show.
Yeah.
I really think if they remastered this film and rescanned the negative, you guys would rate it higher.
Probably.
What we're missing is like the Blu-ray HD version. 4K would really push it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I know who my next cosplay is. It's going to be Isaacs. It's
Yep.
great.
Yeah, you have to explain it. You're like, all right, everyone, I know you don't know who this is, but in 1995, there was a TV movie. There's a character. She has sex right off the bat, then her head explodes. Anyways, I'm her.
That's it.
All right. Well, Karen, thank you so much for joining us to watch Trapped in Space. I appreciate you taking the time, both to talk to us and also an hour and a half of watching it.
My internet just crapped out for a second there.
Oh, it's okay. I was just thanking you for being on the show.
It was so fun. I do it anytime, guys. Love it. Jordan, keep picking movies for me to watch. This is amazing.
And listener, you can email us at continuumdrag@gmail.com if you want to get a hold of us about anything. And on Instagram and Twitter, we're going to have clips from this show. Bodies being thrown in an airlock. A head exploding. I don't know, some other stuff. We'll figure out what else is going to be up there. You can find us at Continuum Drag on those social medias. But that about wraps up for the episode. So, listener, thank you for joining us. And Jordan, I'll see you next week.
See you then. Continuum Drag is recorded in Toronto, Ontario. Theme music by James Rex Seidler. Produced by Jordan Dullock and Luke Black. Special thanks to Aaron Hughes.